Major General Mr. Eitan Dangot, and joining us as well, Mr. Michael Bosterque, Senior Fellow, the Atlantic Council Global Affairs Analyst. Thank you so very much, Mr. Bosterque, for joining us. Well, I do want to begin with one remark that we've heard from the Israeli Premier in this press conference, addressing the Americans directly, telling them, you need to recruit as well to eliminate Hamas. It is your objective and it is interesting that at this point of the war, with all the support, he finds it important to reiterate the American commitment to eliminate Hamas specifically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was a very interesting press conference. And by the way, I didn't hear much about an off-ramp. And this is from the get-go. Any war is very, very expensive, but this is going to be a very, very expensive war for Israel, of course, in many ways. Yeah. But I think in terms of what's happening in the U.S., it's not only in the U.S., but in other capitals as well. I think the leaders are watching very carefully how long this is going on. Yeah. They're looking at civilian casualties. The numbers are very, very big, but they're also, as any leader would do, look at their electorate and what they're doing. And you have, for example, Macron, France, with very big populations of both sides, and he's trying to navigate that. The other thing that's happening...
And by the way, the Prime Minister saying loud and clear, French President Macron did many good things, but made a grave mistake.
Exactly. And also remember that President Biden came into this with not doing that well in the polls. And I think there's a lot of concern in the White House right now how this war will affect him. Actually, not only this war, but the Ukraine war. Look, I go to the States a lot, and there's so much concern right now about how much resources is going into supporting Israel and supporting Ukraine, and we saw that play out a little bit on Capitol Hill the other day as well.
Right, with the budget that is being challenged already by Republicans on the aid to Ukraine, not so much from the Republican Party, at least when it comes to Israel. The problem is more from the progressive elements within the Democratic Party. And in this respect, Biden is essentially fighting two wars now.
Yeah, and two wars where, I'm sure President Putin of Russia, President Xi of China are sitting back, probably smiling, grinning, because that's exactly what they like. They like division. But also we see Mr. Putin, who is hell-bent on eradicating Ukrainian culture, Ukrainian people as well, but also using this opportunity to curry favor with his friends in the global south, and it's really disgusting that someone like him would use this war to do that, but it shouldn't be surprising. Yeah. The other thing I can say, it's kind of a footnote, but because the Ukraine war we're almost into 2 years, what is happening as well is there's a huge shortage of things like ammunition.
Right.
So of missiles, things like that.
I can't believe that we're lacking weapons on the global stage. Who would have thought that you will have too little?
Yeah, sad fact, isn't it? Yeah.
But speaking of President Putin of Russia, an interesting. What seems to be like as a side note, but very much at the center of the battle, Microsoft CEO saying today that there are clear indications that Russia is behind a massive disinformation campaign against Israel in this respect. But I do want to ask Mr. Bosterque, what is the favorable scenario in the post war situation here? What would Putin like to see?
You mean with Ukraine, or
here in the region, here in the Middle East?
Well, look, one of the things one worries about, of course, is the longer this continues, of course, the deaths on both sides, but also civilian deaths, the outrage happening outside the country. But also, there's a lot of deaths happening in Gaza. I remember when I was working here many, many years ago with UNICEF, we went to Gaza a lot. And even in those days, which were relatively quiet, you worried about when kids lost their parents or families or whatever, what would happen to them, whether they would become militant or, radicalized. That should be a big, big concern here as well. What is going to be the future of this youth? And for heaven's sake, there's that big meeting of Arab leaders in Riyadh right now. let them once and for all sit down and look at the bigger picture, because it's not only in Gaza that we're looking at this big proportion of youth, about 50%. It's also throughout the region. I covered, for example, Tahrir Square. You know what all the young people there told me is that we have no hope. It's tough to get jobs. We have no money. So this also feeds into radicalism. And when you put on top of that climate triggers from climate change and also food insecurity, it's a tinderbox. So they also have to think, I think, as one group on how we bring things back more into order for this huge population of youth who don't see much of a future.
Yes, of course, the horizon is of paramount importance here. And in this respect, Major General Dangot, again, the U.S. is already investing a lot of thought in what is to happen the day after the war in the Gaza Strip, and it seems that the choices are not of between the good and the better, but rather the bad and the worse.
I think you're right in your direction, but according to what we heard about the future, I'm worried about the present. What will be now, what will be tomorrow, because after what happened here on the 7th of October, it has changed priorities. That first of all, and I was in a plans all the rounds escalation that were with Gaza, and immediately thinking about the day after. No, day after should be only when Hamas will lost is present in Gaza. The entity should be remarked, disappear. And then we can talk about a future that will be with a lot of stations on find the right mechanism. And at that case, we will need a lot of unity by some countries. And I may tell you that, in my opinion, United States and some major Arab moderate countries are waiting that Israel will succeed to reach its goals, because they understand that the present today in Israel, tomorrow it will be in their places. They cannot say it loudly. So United States, and I was surprised for one thing, the Prime Minister raised today in his speech concerning Gaza, that he expects from United States to be more involved.
Right.
Not about the humanitarian. The United States, it's
About
like
the fight against Hamas.
triangle major interest. First of all, humanitarian with Gaza. That was supposed that they will be happy with it till Israel achieve their goal. Secondly, not escalation in the north for a war. And the third, above all, major aerial escalation with Russia, China, because of what's going here. So now what Bibi Netanyahu raised, he combined the light thing that we have to take care for ourselves, that he said, I expect from United States to be, what is the meaning of much more involved?
Yeah, so Mr. Bosterq, a connecting line between Taiwan, Kyiv, and Jerusalem.
Oh, absolutely. But first of all, if I can, I mean, I'm with you on that page. I mean, Hamas needs to be wiped off the face of the earth. It's absolutely disgusting that they hide themselves among civilians, and you see what's happening. But yeah, the other thing, I talked earlier about distraction, division that's happening. And I can assure you, Mr. Xi in Beijing, he's going to meet with Mr. Biden next week in San Francisco. But they're also, they've been watching the Ukraine war very, very carefully. They say they're not involved, but I have my doubts about that. Drone technology, that sort of thing being given to the Russians. But you know, how the war in Ukraine is fought, how this war is fought, how much U.S. resources is giving, is going to give Beijing some kind of signals as to how the response will be.
When the Americans are getting into
exactly,
business.
and how secure, how ironclad is the security guarantee to Israel, and that will also affect
not just American allies watching, American enemies, of course. And yeah, moment of truth for the Western world. No other way to put it. Yet another moment of truth. Mr. Michael Bosterq, Major General Eitan Dangot, thank you so very much, gentlemen, for joining us. We appreciate your time, your insight.